My name is Lily, and I recently turned 15. Let me tell you about my family and how everything changed in my life. On the surface, we appeared to be an ordinary family. David, my dad, worked tirelessly, while Karen, my mom, stayed home. I had a younger sister, Daisy, who was 8 years my junior. David managed a large company that originally belonged to my maternal grandmother, Evelyn. She was a driven woman who started her business with a few laundromats and later expanded into producing laundry detergents and cleaning products. When Evelyn decided to step back and retire, she offered the company to Karen, but Mom wasn't interested, so Dad took over instead. That's when the problems began. I'll never forget the day our lives began to unravel. I was in my room, struggling to concentrate on my homework, when I heard Karen shouting at David downstairs. "You're nothing but a loser, Frank. This is my house, my family's business. You should be grateful I let you run it." From then on, their arguments became more frequent and intense. They barely spoke to each other, and when they did, it always ended in a fight. I did my best to distract Daisy, but even at just 7 years old, she sensed something was wrong. Then came the day everything truly fell apart. I got home from school to find David standing in the living room with a suitcase at his feet. My voice trembled as I asked, "David, what's going on?" He walked over, pulling me into a tight hug. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," he said softly. "I can't stay here anymore. It's not good for anyone." My chest tightened as I struggled to process his words. "But what about Daisy? What about me?" I pleaded. Tears filled his eyes as he replied, "I love you both so much. Never forget that. But sometimes, love just isn't enough." He kissed my forehead before turning to Daisy, who watched the scene unfold with wide, confused eyes. Kneeling down, he hugged her tightly and said, "Take care of your big sister, okay, Pumpkin?" Then, without another word, he walked out, leaving the house eerily quiet and me feeling hollow. When Karen came home about an hour later, I told her what had happened. She didn't look surprised. If anything, she seemed prepared for it. "Good riddance," she muttered under her breath. "Karen!" I exclaimed, unable to believe what I was hearing. "How can you say that?" Her expression hardened as she turned to face me. "Your father cheated on me, Lily. Over and over again. I couldn't take it anymore." That night, as I lay in bed, I heard Karen laughing on the phone in her room. She sounded happier than she had in months, and though I was curious about who she was talking to, exhaustion won out. Just when I thought life couldn't get any more complicated, Karen surprised us again. One morning during breakfast, she casually announced, "I have some news. I'm getting married." I nearly choked on my cereal. "What? Karen, David's only been gone 3 months." She waved dismissively, as if it were nothing. "True love doesn't follow a timeline, Lily. You'll understand when you're older." 2 weeks later, Mark moved in. He was okay, I guess. He was tall and good-looking, in a way that made people say, "Oh, he seems nice." But from the start, something about him didn't sit right with me. He made an effort with Daisy, playing games with her and helping with her homework. But with me, it felt like I didn't exist. Meanwhile, things were changing at the company too. After David left, Karen took over, and she brought Mark in to work with her. They seemed to work well together, always talking about business plans. I tried to focus on my own life, school, friends, and the usual teenage stuff, but it was hard to shake the feeling that I was becoming invisible in my own family. Things got worse when Karen and Mark announced they were opening a new branch of the company in another city. One evening, Karen said, "We're moving. It's a great opportunity for the business." Then she added, "Mark and I have been talking, and we think it's best if you stay here." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Stay here without you?" I asked, shocked. Karen quickly explained, "The new house won't have much space and you're almost finished with school. It wouldn't make sense to transfer right before your exams." It felt like a punch to the stomach. "So where am I supposed to live? On the street?" I asked, trying not to cry. Don't be dramatic, Lily, Karen scolded. You'll stay with your grandmother. She's already agreed to it. I stormed off to my room and slammed the door. As I lay on my bed, tears of anger and hurt ran down my face. I couldn't stop thinking, when did I become such a burden to my own mother? The next few weeks flew by, filled with packing boxes and goodbyes, not for me, though. The tears were from Daisy, who didn't want to leave her friends behind. I helped Daisy pack, trying to stay cheerful for her sake. "Will you come visit us, Laura?" she asked, her big brown eyes filled with tears. I hugged her tightly. "Of course I will, Squirt. You can't get rid of me that easily." The day they left, I stood on the porch with Evelyn, watching as the moving van pulled away. Karen gave me a quick hug, and Mark gave an awkward nod. Then they were gone, taking Daisy with them. Living with Evelyn wasn't as bad as I had imagined. She was pretty cool in her own way, giving me space when I needed it, but always there with a cup of tea and a kind ear when I wanted to talk. Still, it didn't feel like home. My 20th birthday came faster than I expected. That morning, I woke up feeling strange. I should have been excited, but all I felt was empty. Karen called, of course. "Happy birthday, sweetie," she said, sounding overly cheerful. "I'm sorry we can't be there. Work is just crazy right now. We'll celebrate next month when we visit, okay?" I knew we wouldn't. They hadn't visited once since they moved. "Sure, Karen. Sounds great." Evelyn must have sensed how I was feeling because she really went all out. She let me invite a few friends over, ordered my favorite food, and even baked a cake herself. For a few hours, I almost forgot about everything. The next morning, Evelyn called me into her office. She had a serious look on her face that made my stomach drop. "Sit down, Lily," she said, pointing to the chair across from her desk. "We need to talk." My mind raced. Oh no, is she kicking me out? Where would I go? But then she smiled, reached into her desk drawer, and pulled out a small folder. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Open it." I did, and my heart nearly stopped when I saw what was inside. "Evelyn, is this—" She nodded, her eyes sparkling. "The company is yours now, Lily. I see potential in you. You've got a good head on your shoulders, and I know you'll do right by the business." "But Karen and Mark? They're running it now," I said, still in disbelief. Evelyn's face tightened a little. "They're running a branch, the main company, the heart of it all. That's yours now." I sat frozen in disbelief. Me? Just barely 20 years old, suddenly the owner of a multi-million-dollar company? It felt surreal, like stepping into a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. I don't know what to say," I finally stammered. Evelyn reached out and clasped my hand gently. "You don't have to say anything right now. Just promise me one thing. Give it your best effort." I nodded, still dazed. "I will." I promise. Her face softened with a satisfied smile. "Good. Now, listen carefully. I have one more piece of advice for you." I leaned in, completely focused on her words. "Call your father," she said firmly. "There's more to the story than you realize. Even if it's just to consult with him, reach out. Hear him out." It took me an entire week to summon the courage to call David. We agreed to meet at a small downtown cafe. As soon as I saw him, my heart ached. He looked older, worn down, but his eyes lit up when he saw me. At first, the silence between us was heavy and awkward. Then, as if a dam had broken, everything spilled out: my struggles with the divorce, Karen's remarriage, the move, and Evelyn's unexpected decision to hand me the company. David listened intently, his expression a mixture of pain and understanding. When I finished, he took a deep breath before speaking. "Lily, there's something you should know about the divorce." His voice was low and heavy with emotion. Then he revealed everything: how Karen constantly belittled him, calling him a failure and making him feel worthless. After one particularly explosive argument, he admitted he'd gotten drunk and made a terrible mistake. "I cheated on her," he confessed, his tone thick with regret. I hated myself for it. but she used it to destroy me. She threatened to take everything: my home, my reputation, even you and Daisy. She left me no choice but to leave quietly. I sat in stunned silence. This didn't align with the mother I thought I knew. "Why didn't you fight her?" I finally asked. His eyes met mine, filled with a mix of sorrow and love. "Because of you and Daisy. I couldn't put you through a messy public battle. I thought this would protect you both." As we talked, I felt an enormous weight lifting off my chest. For the first time in what felt like forever, I had my dad back. Before we parted ways, I took a deep breath and asked, "David, would you consider helping me with the company as a consultant?" His warm smile was all the answer I needed. The months that followed were a whirlwind. I juggled late-night study sessions, exams, and my looming responsibilities. Then came the moment I'd been working toward, standing on stage at my high school graduation, diploma in hand. Evelyn sat proudly in the audience, beaming at me. Karen and Mark were nowhere in sight, but by then I had stopped expecting much from them. Summer brought the thrill of college applications, with Evelyn cheering me on and David supporting me from afar. When acceptance letters began arriving, I was overjoyed. But the biggest shock came with the financial aid package from my top choice school, a full scholarship. I stared at the letter in disbelief, and Evelyn pulled me into a hug, her pride radiating. "I knew you could do it, kiddo. All that hard work paid off." Choosing to major in business management felt like the logical step, especially with the company now in my hands. The reality of running a business was daunting, but I was determined to make Evelyn proud. To celebrate my acceptance, she planned a quiet evening for just the two of us. We ordered fancy takeout and sipped sparkling cider, Evelyn's way of marking the occasion without letting me have champagne. Halfway through dinner, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Evelyn frowned and motioned for me to answer it. As I opened the door, my heart sank. Standing there were Karen and Mark, both looking irritated and impatient. Before I could say a word, they brushed past me into the house. Karen didn't bother with pleasantries. "Mother, we need to discuss the company immediately." I stood there, stunned, as she launched into a tirade. She didn't so much as glance at me or ask about my graduation or college plans. It was as if I didn't exist. "Why can't we access the main accounts?" she demanded. "And why are you blocking the transfer of funds to our branch?" Evelyn's expression hardened, her voice icy. "Because it's no longer your decision, Karen. The company belongs to Lily now. She's in charge of its future and the finances." The room went silent. I could feel the tension hanging in the air. After Evelyn's words, I saw a wave of emotions cross Karen's face, first shock, then anger, and finally something calculating. Suddenly, her whole attitude shifted. "Lily, sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with fake kindness. "I've missed you so much. Why don't you come live with us?" I blinked, caught off guard by this sudden change. Karen stepped closer, reaching out like she wanted to touch my arm. Instinctively, I stepped back. "We've settled so nicely in the new city. We have a beautiful house, and there's a room just for you. We could set up a desk and get you a new computer for your studies and work." "No, Karen," I said firmly. "I'm happy here. I have my friends, my school, and Evelyn needs me." Karen's smile wavered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Well, if that's the issue, we could always move back here. We could live in our old house just like before. Wouldn't that be nice?" I shook my head. "It's not about the house, Karen. It's about everything." I could see the anger building in her eyes, barely contained. Before she could say anything, I decided to ask the question that had been burning inside me for months. "Karen, why did you really divorce David?" She froze, taken aback. "Well, your father. He cheated on me multiple times. I got tired of it. He left us for his mistress and didn't even pay alimony." "That's not true," I said quietly. "David told me everything. It only happened once, and it was because of how you treated him. He didn't abandon us. You kicked him out, and he's been paying alimony regularly." Karen's face twisted with anger. How dare you, you ungrateful little brat! You have no right to interfere in my personal life. Everything here is mine, and I decide who lives where. Evelyn, who had been quietly watching, finally stepped forward. Her voice was calm but firm, stronger than I had ever heard before. That's enough, Karen, she said. You seem to have forgotten a few things. This house, the company, they belong to me, not you. I gave the company to Lily because I trust her judgment more than yours. Right now, I think it's time for you to leave. I watched with mixed emotions as Evelyn firmly escorted Karen and Mark out of the house. The door clicked shut behind them, and I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. I had lost something today, the last bit of hope I had about my mother. But I gained something too, a clear sense of my future and the comfort of knowing I wasn't alone. What now? I asked, my voice muffled against Evelyn's shoulder. She pulled back and gave me a small smile. Now we get back to celebrating your college acceptance, and tomorrow we start planning for your real future, not the one your mother tried to force on you. The next morning, after the confrontation with Karen and Mark, I woke up to the sound of voices downstairs. Curious, I crept down the stairs and peeked into the living room. To my surprise, David was sitting on the couch, deep in conversation with Evelyn. I sat down next to them, and Evelyn explained why she had called David over. I've been thinking about Daisy, she said. Your mother, well, I'm not sure she's in the best position to care for her right now. I've suggested your father seek custody of Daisy. I felt a surge of hope. Really, David? Are you going to do it? He ran his hand through his hair, looking both nervous and determined. Yeah, I am. It won't be easy, but Daisy deserves better than what she's getting now. I couldn't help it. I threw my arms around him. Thank you, David. As we pulled apart, Evelyn cleared her throat. There's more, she said. I've hired a private investigator to look into your mother and Mark's affairs. In the weeks that followed, life found an odd new rhythm. I started my college classes, throwing myself into my studies with a newfound determination. David began visiting regularly, and together we worked on rebuilding our relationship. Having him back in my life felt like a piece of the puzzle falling into place. Then, 2 weeks after that pivotal conversation, Evelyn called us both over. Her expression was serious as we sat down. The investigator's report is in, she began without preamble, and it's worse than we imagined. She proceeded to lay out the findings, each revelation hitting me like a blow. Karen had been unfaithful to David for years, long before their divorce. Her affair with Mark had started while she was still married to him. The evidence was damning hotel receipts, records of extravagant gifts, and other proof that left no room for doubt. But the real shock came next. Mark is a con artist, Evelyn stated, her voice steady and grim. This isn't his first time. He preys on wealthy women, gains their trust, persuades them to move their money, and then disappears with it. I felt a wave of nausea. So when they tried to access the company's funds, Evelyn nodded gravely. That's exactly what he was planning to do, steal it and vanish. The room fell silent as we absorbed the weight of her words. Finally, Evelyn broke the quiet. We have to confront Karen with the truth. The meeting was set for the next day. Karen arrived at Evelyn's house with her usual air of impatience and irritation, but her demeanor shifted the moment she saw David there. What followed was one of the hardest conversations of my life. Evelyn laid out all the evidence: the affair, Mark's history of fraud, and his scheme to steal from the company. I watched Karen closely, searching her face for any sign of remorse or recognition, but all I saw was denial. This is absurd, Karen said, her tone defensive and dismissive. Mark loves me. He would never do something like that. You're all just jealous of what we have. David tried to reason with her, his voice calm but pleading. Karen, please look at the facts. Think about Daisy. Is this really the kind of man you want around our daughter? But Karen refused to listen. Her face flushed with anger, she stood abruptly. I don't have to sit here and take this. Mark is a good man, and I trust him completely. With that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The room felt heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. As we sat in silence, the reality sank in. This wasn't the end, it was only the beginning of a long and difficult battle. But as I looked at Evelyn and David, their expressions resolute despite everything, I realized something important. I wasn't in this fight alone. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal battles and emotional ups and downs. With Evelyn's strong support and her legal expertise, David filed for custody of Daisy. I tried to stay focused on my studies, but it was hard not to get distracted by everything happening around me. The day of the custody hearing came, and I insisted on being there. The whole thing was tough. Karen's lawyer tried to make David look like he wasn't involved in our lives, but our lawyer was ready. He showed proof of David's regular alimony payments, how he had tried to keep in touch with us, and the stable life he had now. Then came the big shock: the private investigators' report about Mark's criminal past and their plan to steal from the company. I watched Karen's face as the truth came out. First, she looked shocked, then angry, and finally, lost. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her, almost. When the judge gave full custody of Daisy to David, I felt a mix of emotions: relief that Daisy would be safe, but also sadness that it had come to this. As we left the courthouse, Daisy in David's arms, Karen approached us. "This isn't over," she hissed, her eyes full of anger. Evelyn stepped in between us. "Yes, Karen, it is. Go home." Things only got worse for Karen after that. The judge ordered her to pay child support to David for Daisy. It was a huge shock for her, since she'd always thought she'd be the one receiving support, not paying it. I threw myself into my studies and learning more about the company, trying to stay away from the family drama, but I couldn't help feeling a bit satisfied when I heard that Mark had left Karen, running off with another woman and a large chunk of Karen's personal savings. One crisp autumn evening, David called me. His voice carried a tension I hadn't heard in a while. "Your mother came by my place today," he began, the weight of the encounter evident. "She said she wants to reconcile, that she made a mistake and wants us to be a family again." My chest tightened at his words. A small, deeply buried part of me wished he could say yes, wished we could go back to the way things were before everything fell apart. But I knew better now. Too much had happened, and some wounds couldn't be undone. "I told her no," David said with quiet resolve. "I told her that ship sailed long ago and that I wouldn't put you or Daisy through that again." A wave of relief washed over me, and I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Good," I replied, surprised by the strength in my own voice. "You deserve better, David. We all do." There was a brief pause before he spoke again, his tone lighter now, almost amused. "When did you get so wise, Lily?" I smiled, warmth spreading through me. "I learned from the best." After we hung up, I glanced around my room in Evelyn's house. Textbooks were scattered across the desk, mingling with company reports. On the bulletin board above, photos of me with David and Daisy smiled back at me. This wasn't the life I had envisioned a year ago. It was far from perfect. There were still challenges to face and uncertainties to navigate, but it was real. It was mine. My thoughts drifted to Karen, now alone after all her schemes and betrayals. A flicker of pity surfaced but was quickly overtaken by a sense of justice. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. As for me, I had a family who loved me, a company to lead, and a future brimming with opportunities. This wasn't the path I'd imagined, but standing at the start of this new chapter, I understood something important. Life rarely goes as planned, but it's what you make of the unexpected that truly matters. The months flew by as I balanced college coursework with running a multi-million-dollar company. Before I knew it, I was halfway through my degree, immersed in lectures, late-night study sessions, and financial reports. Weekdays were a blur of responsibilities, but weekends became my sanctuary. Every Sunday, I packed a bag and headed to David and Daisy's home. The moment I walked through the door, Daisy, now 12 and full of energy, would come bounding toward me, yelling, "Lily!" before tackling me with a hug. David would emerge from the kitchen, usually wearing an apron, just as dinner was ready. "Perfect timing," he'd say with a grin. Those weekends grounded me. We'd share meals together, Daisy animatedly recounting her week at school while David and I talked about the company. Once Daisy was in bed, David and I often stayed up late, poring over business strategies and planning for the future. Thursdays, however, belonged to Evelyn. Her house was always filled with the aroma of home-cooked meals, roast chicken, apple pie, and every comfort food imaginable. After lunch, we'd sit on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. "I always knew you had it in you, Lily," Evelyn would say, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. As graduation approached, excitement and nerves mingled within me. David, true to his word, had been running the company seamlessly while preparing me to step into his role. One evening, as we wrapped up a conversation about the business, he turned to me and said, "Whenever you're ready, I'm ready to pass the torch." I threw my arms around him in gratitude. "Thank you, David, for everything." Life was far from perfect. There were still hurdles to overcome and decisions to be made. But as I looked at the people around me, David, Daisy, and Evelyn, I knew that together, we could handle whatever the future held.